Ahoy! We get a ton of new information from the devs, for example about better ways to get dark matter, as well as better ways to farm artifacts, and I wanted to share that with you. The first question was if the devs are happy with the current state of dark matter, how much you need to farm and how much is needed to upgrade in general, and if there are plans to either reduce the amounts you need or give us more ways to get it or better ways to get it. The devs are generally happy with the overall state, but they recognize that there's room for improvement for the more casual players. Especially people with 200 PvP track and Sandworm Raiders seem to be fine, whereas people that play more casually, for example play a lot of OPR, don't seem to have as much in comparison. And I can absolutely see that as someone who's been playing mainly open world PvP as well as arenas. Both of these things don't exactly provide a lot of dark matter by itself. On the other hand, even running low-level dungeons provides a lot more, which was already the issue with Umbral Shards. They are planning to do some balance changes to this coming with Season 4, to a few of these faucets they say, while making sure casual players have enough to upgrade items at a consistent enough cadence. When it comes to struggles with farming things, another thing that is definitely worth pointing out are the artifacts. I actually asked a very similar question recently for the dev talk, but I'm glad that they are answering it here now. Which is if we will get any kind of bad luck protection for artifacts, and specifically also something for the PvP track, where you have a chance to get something past a certain point, but you don't know when exactly you'll get it, because that's still RNG. The devs described that they're actually running into the same issues. One of them doesn't have Serenity yet, some of them did 35 mutations and never got Blood Drinker. So they are tackling this on a few fronts. First of all, artifacts from creature drops will get some kind of bad luck protection, I guess similar to what we had at past events. I'm very glad they're reintroducing this. I feel like this should have really been on these artifacts from the very beginning. It seems like an obvious choice. If you put something so important and build changing into the game, you put some bad luck protection on it so that everyone will be able to get it eventually and not just purely rely on RNG. For the PvP reward track artifacts, there are some changes for the frequency at certain reward track pipes that they'll talk about in more depth later. I imagine this may be affecting the chances between uneven and even levels to even get artifacts. This may also potentially affect players with track 200 that actually have a harder time getting certain artifacts than somebody at track 100, which is a little bit weird. So we'll see how exactly that plays out, but they are working to improve that. On the other hand, they have no current plans to improve the PvE trials, the loot pool for that or anything like that. They said they have brought a lot of legacy content into continued relevance, but these trials are currently not one of them. And they do like them, but there are no plans in the works to bring these back into the fold for now. And I think that is completely fine. They're really not that fun or engaging when you've done them a few times. There seems to be an interesting change to upgradable items. Initially it seemed like the items that we're supposed to be able to upgrade are ones above 650 gear score, but then in-game it seemed like items below that are apparently also upgradable. In response to the question if there will be a way to tell in-game which items are upgradable, they said that generally speaking, if an item is a named item that is above 625 gear score, you should be able to upgrade the item to 700 gear score and reroll a perk. They are aware of a few instances where that is currently not true, for example the PvP track rewards, and I think for example the Savage Divide named items are currently like that as well, and they treat that as bugs and will rectify that once they catch them. They're also asking people to report any of those bugged items that you may come across. And at this point I'm going to ask you to maybe help me shift these two little bars a tiny bit in the other direction. That would be very helpful, thank you. When asked about global storage, Zenorum responded that there is no such plan. They like the concept but think that the current tabbed storage system between different towns kind of helps you sort things. I'm kind of thinking we could just have both, just a combined storage and those tabbed storages. But they're also discussing if you can potentially label each town. I think that in itself would already be very helpful. They love the idea of making soul trials repeatable. Nothing they can share at the moment, but they'll definitely be talking about this more internally. When asked if there are any plans on adding more furniture, Chadis said that they're always adding more furniture to the game. They added a couple with Rise of the Angry Earth and are looking to add more in the future. I feel like compared to Brimstone, the furniture kind of fell short with Elysian Wilds, but on the other hand, at least you don't have to grind almost impossible to get schematics. The next question was if there are any plans to up the XP gains and gold earned in Outpost Rush, because swapping from PvE to PvP can get expensive if you're swapping multiple times a day with food buffs, respec, etc. I will say that I think this is the wrong angle to ask this. I wouldn't have asked about Outpost Rush. I would have asked about tying attribute respecs to gear sets. That would be much better in my opinion. Make it a one-time fee and then you don't have to do it every time. that would just be way less annoying as well. They have some changes to PvP XP and Outpost Rush coming in Season 4 that will make it more rewarding and help you progress your PvP reward track more quickly, which should translate to more opportunities for coin from the track. Outside of that, Outpost Rush remains a lucrative opportunity to get coin, and they're happy with where its coin generation is at. I really hope that if they increase the track reward for Outpost Rush, they also give something to arenas, because arenas are finally having an active player base, and that could very quickly go away when it turns out that suddenly the better track option is Outpost Rush, because otherwise Outpost Rush is way more rewarding in every single way. They were asked about achievements and if they want to add any new ones for human mobs, as well as generally expand them. And they said they've talked about this, but they are not planning any drastic changes for overhaul in the short term. They want to do something for human enemies specifically. I do think it's good that they are not focusing on achievements. They are still bugged for a few people sometimes, I think. So that's one thing in the first place that kind of makes them less relevant for many players. And also, they really shouldn't be the biggest focus. I think there are achievement hunters, but I don't really think that investing too much time into that over more important features should be a priority for them. Somebody once again asked about the chromatic seals for named items, if it's actually meant to be 3 or if it's meant to be 1, and they once again confirmed that 3 is the intended amount right now, but they are considering additional sources for seals in the future. So they want to keep seals important, and I think that especially makes sense insofar that it's one of the reasons why influence races are popping off so much, so I think it's not the worst call as much as I don't like things being locked in the faction store. There was some further question if they are planning to allow players to craft or buy multiple seals per day. They said not at the moment, but maybe in the season of giving, so probably something tied to the winter event. Apparently the music sheets in-game now cover almost all of the actual in-game soundtrack. So the question was if there will be more music or instruments in the future. They kind of avoided that question a little bit. They said the Medley Fair event will return next year with some of the remaining music sheets, but not really mentioned anything about any new sheets after that. They have no plans for new instruments at this time, but they're curious what kind of instruments we'd like to see. The next one is a bit of a funny one. They were asked if they would consider making chromatic seals bind on equip, so there's more interaction, more trade between players, instead of this current self-sufficiency with the bind on pickup status. I'm just gonna read you the response here. No plans to make chromatic seals bind on equip right now. We are happy with their bind on pickup status, as it levels out the playing field between more time-rich and more casual players, such that the time-rich can't buy a bunch of seals and zoom past others. There is a small thing they're missing here. People are still buying crafts all the time. Sure, you need to have the person at the higher trade skill, so the supply is not quite the same as seals being available directly, but generally there is a lot of supply on the market in the trade chat of people selling their crafts, and you can do that. You can buy that as a rich player. You can even buy an Athos Inductor craft, because none of the items that you can craft from it are actually bind on pickup, while that was originally the plan for them. So this is a bit of a confusing choice, and yeah, this kind of means that people can still buy an advantage just as before. When asked if they are planning to add farming to houses, they said there are no plans for that at the moment. They like the idea, but obviously that's a very big investment in terms of work to be done for it, and they don't have any plans to tackle that soon. Gypsum casts are currently very left behind. They don't really provide much of anything anymore. They provide gear that's kind of completely outdated already. Same with the legendary version that even costs dark matter. So none of it really makes sense, and they clutter up the entire Gypsum crafting menu, and so do the old expedition items. So yeah, they were asked if they're going to change anything about that. They are taking a look at Gypsum casts, which is potentially something interesting. They don't anticipate these changes for Season 4, but they understand the sentiment that they're in a weird spot right now. They think that the Gypsum Kiln as a whole has more utility now, which is true with all the named crafts you can do, so they're evaluating the cast place in the game. What I don't get is why they didn't give Gypsum Cast the same purpose that it had before. Of course not for old store Gypsum Cast, but just give them the option to convert them to dark matter. Sure, some people would get a lot of dark matter out of that, but I think most people would not have that much gypsum that would make a significant difference. And if you just open a gypsum cast and you get a bad item, but then maybe 2 dark matter with it, it might be worth doing a few a day, and every activity gets rewarded a little bit. I thought that was smart. I thought that was a useful way to implement that, and I don't really understand why they took that away at all, so maybe they just bring that back. Hopefully they don't forget about infused casts either, because I am drowning in infused fragments. Jake asked about the download sizes, because many of the smaller patches are currently 15 to 20 gigabytes, which can take a very long time for some people, me included. And they explain that in a lot of technical detail that I'm going to spare you here, but in summary, to make it quick, the files are very large quite often, even though the changes are not, because entire sections of the game are basically being changed, even if it's just a small change in those sections. And because there are so many smaller changes happening at the moment with every fix, it kind of affects many different segments. And they have some plans to improve this. I imagine that they will maybe make those sections themselves smaller. But it is also worth keeping in mind here, while they didn't specifically say this, Steam is obviously also a factor in that, in how they transmit the data and everything else. So there's a lot of cogs going into each other here that make things a lot more complicated. But what they are doing, what they're planning to do, is do some engine optimizations to help minimize these patch deltas further. They will arrive with Season 4, so hopefully we should see some smaller patches then. The question of a custom or casual war mode was brought up once again. They say that right now all of their focus is on the cross-world for the existing modes. I'm glad that they're done with that soon though, because for Australian players it doesn't really matter all that much, unless you're playing on Sutek. And then they say that Outpost Rush provides some amount of practice for Wars, but they realize it's not the same. They do like Wars, it's highlighting some of the more unique gameplay available in the game, and only a small portion of the player base gets to experience it, so it's definitely something they would like to provide in the future. They've said this multiple times, but they're not really giving us any more exact details or information on when they are planning to start working on this, so it's a very vague one. It might as well be in the next expansion after all. When asked about the current imbalance of self-healing in the game, DevJR responded, much of the self-healing was already in the game, but with the increase in gear score and Rise of the Angry Earth, values went quite a bit higher. In addition, Shirking Heals is providing more than double the amount of healing it was intended, and this will be fixed in the next upcoming update, which should be coming in the next days. As far as we know, it should be around Halloween. They have further healing updates coming with Season 4 that will make Ankh and Lifestaff abilities no longer increase lifesteal. They don't specifically mention Divine and the Focus perk here, so that's going to be interesting if we get some perks that still work to increase lifesteal, but we'll see what happens in that regard. It is a fairly hard hit to something that I think is not inherently overpowered. I think Shirking Heals was the biggest problem, not lifesteal, but we'll see how it plays out and what exactly it affects first. There won't be a limit to how many territories a single company can own, but they are trying a few more things along the lines of making it more difficult to own multiple territories for long periods of time. They have nothing to share about that yet though. They're not planning to make races instanced to reduce the lag, but they are planning to make races so that there will be 4 territories per day, which also means more pressure for warring companies, and also 2 of them firing at the same time instead of 1, so that spreads out the players more, which means if you want to have a smaller skirmish, you might be able to find an area for that too. They think that should result in much better performance, as they won't be overloading any one location. They say that teleporting will always be a thing as an important function to keep any one faction from overwhelming the area with raw numbers, but I don't think that actually works properly. I'm fairly certain that after a certain number of players you just get teleported out no matter what faction you're in. Sometimes we can see a point entirely clustered with just one faction and everyone else still gets teleported out somehow, so I'm not really sure if this is not working as intended or if they just don't know it's not working properly. But they do hope that this reduces teleporting and improves frame rates. They are planning to make some tweaks to tent spawning. They plan to adjust the respawn cooldown on camps when you die a PvP death, but also considering other changes to PvP respawn rules. This will be applied to all open world PvP, not just race zones. I hope that this doesn't mean significantly longer respawn times at tents all the time. I think that would not be fun. Sure, you have people respawning quickly, but that's also kind of the only way you can fight when you're significantly outnumbered. Like, you have to rely on being able to respawn a few times and come back in, otherwise you'll just always win the numbers game by having more people. So whatever solution they come up with, I hope it's a carefully planned one. They asked about allowing us to do more races even if we've done all of them, and they do feel the same. They want to do that and they have ideas about that, but nothing concrete to share yet. When it comes to cinematics, some of them are rewatchable at the locations, but some are not, and they are not planning to add them anywhere else in the journal or something, and they also don't have plans to add a character compendium. Again, understandable, as this only affects a small portion of players and would be a lot of time invested for this. In the next days I'll talk about the best flail perks and why you shouldn't bother with things like Odo or Michael, so if you're interested in that, consider subscribing and clicking the bell. That will then be followed by the updated flail guide. If you'd like to support my work further and get early trading tips in return, I just posted a few new ones, then consider supporting me on Patreon. Thanks to all of my patrons who already do exactly that, and thank you for watching. Duke Sloth, out.